Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick. I'm an alcoholic. And absolute privilege just to be here. I used to sit in these chairs as well for a while. And a privilege for me just to share a life story with just some years down the road. I was born in Holland at a very early age. It was very traumatic. I didn't speak for a year, just like most of you, and had a lovely upbringing for the first 9 years. 3 sisters. That was traumatic. 3 sisters and a mom and a dad that were very loving. And then we immigrated from Holland to South Africa. And that's where, in a sense, where the hardness of life I was exposed to it. It was really fun just going to another country. But the school system at that time was kind of rough, I was put in an Afrikaans school, so you wear a safari pak, just a safari suit, khaki. And if you're out of line, they take you in a little room and they just nail you from behind, meaning, can you? I don't know why you're laughing. And so it was really adjustment. My sisters, I have twin sisters. They look the same, identical. 2 years older. They had each other. I had to make friends and get to know the South African education system, as in Afrikaans schools. And I remember still the early days, I discovered in South Africa these fantastic Vicks bubble gums. I mean, these days it's just everything other than beaches. But there's, you could blow bubbles with them. It was really 2 for a cent. Like, okay, this is long ago. And what I didn't know is that you were not allowed to chew gum on the playground. So I was just, chewing away, and suddenly the teacher who was on duty saw me. Didn't know that I didn't know that you're not allowed to chew gum. And I think he had a fight with his wife that morning, if he was married, because he just lashed out at me. It's just over 50 years later, I can still see his face. I couldn't get what he was saying because I was still learning to speak Afrikaans. But I know what happened to me there was just absolute anxiousness that I encountered and just became a part of a very unwelcome companion that I started to travel with. I was so scared to go to school in the mornings, not knowing what would happen. And once I reflected on my youth, I think I was so anxious that I still remember playing in the block of flats that we were living for a few months. And there was this really cute blonde girl. She would have also been about 7 or 8 years old. And we were playing hide and seek, and everybody else was hiding, and we were counting 1, 2, 3, And eventually I just said, "Will you marry me when we grow older?" And I look at that, it was like cute, childlike humor, but I think it was a desperation of saying, I just wanted to belong, I want to be safe, I want to feel safe. We moved to Johannesburg, and every year after that, for a few years, at the beginning of the school term, I would go early to school, walk to school, and then hang around the toilets because I had diarrhea. I was so scared, so anxious about who I was going to meet as the new teacher, and what would he or she be like. So that was the introduction to anxiety, which then became that unwelcome companion that I mentioned. Fast forward some years later, in 1973, I had a significant spiritual awakening where I became totally alive to what the big book says, God. It definitely changed my life. Even my mom, when I started washing dishes as a teenage boy in the house, knew that something was wrong. She actually wanted to take me to the doctor because I wasn't fighting with my sisters anymore. I was really behaving. And she thought there was something seriously wrong with me. The impact of that spiritual awakening was to such an extent that I believed that I needed to become a missionary. And so in 1979, that's what I did. After 5 years of working, doing my army, I actually joined the permanent force and was a dog instructor, teaching people how to train dogs while the dogs are being trained, and training guys to go to the war, which was in Angola at the time. So to make that shift from being a missionary was quite significant. Training people for war and then sharing God's love was just something very, very different. But within my training in this mission organization, it was so helpful, because that's where I actually learned a lot of the 12 steps. It was under the exclusivity of Christianity, which, if you know the history of AA, comes out of the Oxford group. And I think it's been very positive to remove it out of the exclusivity of Christianity, because now it is the God of your own understanding, and all of us just grow in that area. So step 4 to 12 became became very familiar with it. But the step 1 and 3, step 2 was quite clear as well, but step 1 and 3 of saying that I can't manage life really so well and at all, and then handing it over, that was a bit of a struggle sometimes. I'm just going to follow this here. I've had 2 weeks of leave and my brain is a bit mushy at the moment. Part of my journey was then in 1992. I felt that God was guiding me to become a pastor. And part of the joining this particular church and particular denomination, I sometimes joke and I call it an abomination. Part of this denomination was that you had to get a theology degree. Now you need to know I left half standard 9, grade 11, because I was failing 2 terms, and I thought, why would I carry on failing another 2 terms, repeating the year? So I left school, worked in the post office, and then was in the army, and then eventually just then became a missionary. But part of the joining, becoming a pastor, was to get this theology degree. But I had to get my matric first. So I was quite eating humble pie. At age 35, I would walk into the exam room at the end of the year with all these youngsters sitting there and looking at this Bali walking down here. I don't know how you can be a Bali at 35, but it looked like they were thinking this. I was also taught how to study, because I really thought I was not all that together up here. Some of us have it and some of us don't, so accept that. But somebody taught me how to study, and suddenly I was just getting marks that, when I wrote matric, my lowest mark I think was 87. Suddenly I realized, yes, actually so dumb after all, I'm not so dumb after all. And that's when so they allowed you in UNISA to study, first of all, just one subject. They want to see if you're not deaf, can you manage a degree? And I did also very well in that, and then did the degree. A professor that I met said, Nick, if you really want to nail this degree, he says, you need to be able to walk into the exam room with the attitude of, ask me whatever you want. So that's what I did. I would walk into the exam room, and I would not verbally say this because the invigilators didn't care. They just handed out the paper and took it back again. But my attitude was, ask me anything that you want, because I just know my work. However, capital letters, however, that came with such a price. So many hours of studying, and my life just started to just get out of balance totally. Eventually, towards the end of my studies, 1998, I started to wake up in the mornings with some really serious anxiety. And what was really tough about it is I couldn't tell you what I was anxious about. I think I've lost track of my life so much already that actually self-awareness was at an all-time low in my life. And as you know, that's really helpful to have that. I went into a doctor's office, a friend of mine, a GP, and I said, she said, and she listened to me, she says, let's just get you through the year. So out came tranquilizers, and life was just, it just was so cool. It was just great. Now we can cope with life, you see. In the meantime, there was another year of studies ahead, and when I finished end of 98, beginning 99, my body gave all kinds of symptoms of just out of control. And I didn't know who was Arthur or Martha or whatever. I just totally just lost the plot, and I became so desperate. I would wake up in the mornings in the fetus position, be so bloody anxious. And then my wife, loving wife, would say, but let's talk about it. So I can't tell you. I don't know what's causing this. It was absolutely dominating my life. So out of desperation, I walked into the doctor's office without an appointment. I said, I just need to see you. That's the only place that I thought I could get help, obviously. And he just listened to my story, and then made it the same day an appointment with a very, very good psychiatrist, he said. She was a dear lady. I walked in there that afternoon, told my story, and she was really a good listener. I really appreciated that. She was really a good listener. But I did walk out with a script. And in that script was all kinds of goodies. And I was booked off for 3 weeks. So there were tranquilizers in there, and antidepressants, and sleeping pills. The sleeping pills initially didn't work so well, so I asked for Rohypnol's. Well, she actually recommended it, and I discovered later on what Rohypnol's is. I would take 2 and sleep for 3-4 hours. I was just, for 3 weeks I was just totally a zombie. And what the so-called salvation was, I thought at the time, was I've been diagnosed with a disorder. It's legitimate. It's like, this is real. These are people who are professionals. They've studied. They know this stuff. At that time, academic arrogance was just really flourishing in my life. And that was the start of a journey of 12 years of mostly tranquilizers, sleeping pills on and off, antidepressants on and off, because it all depended on what happened in life, because I wasn't coping with life. But my self-awareness was at such a low that I didn't even get that. Here's a legitimate diagnosis by a professional. All I need to do is take these pills. And I only went to one chemist, sort of, because I also discovered, this is really great, I thought, that there's some over-the-counter medication. And if you just take quite a bit, eventually, then it also has a really nice effect. Because what was my purpose in life? Stay calm. Because life is hard. Even people in AA will agree with you. Life is difficult. But I wasn't coping. And I thought I was coping with the pills. But with any addiction, it progresses. And eventually you have to take more medication. It really was a 12-year up and down, up and down, up and down. Try to cut down, take more. Try to cut down, take more. Sorry, my eyesight's not so good. I was just watching where my time is going. Okay. I also became dishonest. Don't ever tell anybody that a pastor got dishonest. But what would happen is that these over-the-counter medication, I wouldn't want you to recognize me. So I would just go to different chemists. And eventually I discovered, my goodness me, this chem sells them for 100. And it's kind of a cheap price. And I'll just take 2 at a time. But then, after 5 minutes, you just want the thing to work quicker, eh? So you take another 2. And then it's another 5 minutes, you take another 2. Eventually, at least in the standard that I was living when it comes to morality, that was really starting to negotiate. And I did it freely because my obsession to remain calm became the main focus of my life. Just want to chill. I just want to be at peace. I mean, who doesn't want to be at peace? I remember I would go to the GP for my yearly checkup. So I wanted to be healthy. And I was fairly healthy, fairly fit. And the results came back about my liver. He says, this is so weird. He says, there's something, it looks like you're drinking, Nick. I said, no, I don't drink. And I was really speaking the truth there. But I didn't disclose. But I'm just taking some stuff at the moment that it's probably that. It's probably that. I'm not going to tell him. But a year or two later, I did. And he was quite okay with it. He says, just not too much. He was a house doctor, family doctor. He was really a really good guy. But in retrospect, I think he was my supplier. I went to him and he adjusted whatever I needed because he trusted me. And I abused that trust. Come 2010, this is 12 years later. I'm not in a good place. I can't tell you the many times I've tried to withdraw. Tried to just cut down. And here's the confusing aspect of withdrawing. Is I got the same symptoms that I had 12 years ago when I went to a doctor. So now, if you don't have any knowledge, that's exceptionally confusing. So, but you're living in this bubble of self-obsessed, self-orientated. There's nobody else other than the doctor. And the doctor says, no, it's okay, we're managing you. But I got to the place where I had such dark rings under my eyes because of all the chemicals I was taking. I was so restless. I started, obviously, a few years before that, I started to isolate more and more. I became emotionally distant to my wife and family in some aspects. We could talk about anything, but let's just not talk about my disorder that I've been diagnosed with. But I got to a place where I didn't go to the gym anymore. I was just sleeping all the time. My speech was slurred, and I wasn't even aware of it. I had short-term memory loss. And I wouldn't even be aware of it because I would be busy telling my wife a story or something, and I would just stop. And she would say, yeah? I said, what? She says, no, finish the story. Said, no, I'm done. I mean, it was just wicked, and so I became aware of that. My wife tried to intervene, tried to speak to her, but eventually, when a husband tells you for so long that I am diagnosed, I get a prescription, I go to the chemist, I'm doing what the doctor tells me. Eventually her voice went quiet. She asked a very good friend to intervene. So he intervened, and I decided to stop the over-the-counter medication for 3 weeks. But I was addicted. So then you just start again. And because you've withdrawn from that particular one, you can start with 2 again. And then it goes up to 4, and then 6. And I was just in such a bad space. Here's the reality. I didn't know what to do. You're in a place where you don't know what to do, you don't know who to ask. It's a very dark place. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm just telling you factual. It's just a very dark place. So I thought, what the best way, because I learned that years ago in that missionary organization, is you've got to be open, you've got to be honest. And at that time, my openness and honesty was very selective. I was open and honest about a lot of stuff, but this area, my area. So I wrote a letter to the leaders in the church. And they're they're actually Christians. They're very kind people. So 3 of them came to see me, and we looked at a way forward. And they said, maybe you need treatment, maybe I know somebody who was addicted to grandpa headache powders, and they went to a rehab. I said, okay. And at that time, there was definitely a level of rock bottom, definitely a level, getting very close to it. But that was to happen a few weeks later. And they said, why don't you phone a rehab and see if you can be an outpatient or an inpatient? So I did. I phoned the rehab on Monday morning. They said, no, you need to be inpatient. I said, okay. I said, do you have a place for me? I'm ready to come. He says, no, sorry, we booked up till 3 weeks later. I said, do you know of any other rehab? And they gave me this other rehab's name. It's not too far from here. And so I phoned them, and there was this nice guy who answered the phone, and I went to come and look. Now, the chief in charge of this rehab does not like you to come and look at his place, because it's his posse, and why would you come and the hell with you, But AA program has been worked in him quite significantly, so he allows that. And I couldn't believe all these guys were friendly. They were just so friendly, these guys and girls in the rehab. And, I need to check if this is not a cult, You never know. You never know. Why are you laughing? Because you also thought that, you see, at times. Yeah, I know. And So I arrived. There's this gentleman who sat there. Quite a history behind him once I discovered him. He says, no, I can't speak as low as he does. He says, you need to have an open mind. And at that time I thought, yeah, I have a pretty fairly open mind. You've got to do that. So I came into rehab and the withdrawal started. To say it was tough would be an understatement. For those who still know me, you know, I was sweating like a pig in Palestine, going to be slaughtered. It was just perspiring. You hardly sleep. It was just tough. But there was an underlying, I just want to get well. I just want to get well. And eventually my sponsor at the time in rehab started saying, nudge, nudge, nudge. He says, we can get you off these drugs, but what will keep you off them? Good question that I wasn't willing to consider. So we had a few chats. He actually got quite irritated at me at one stage. He started raising his voice. And I raised my voice. He told me I was dogmatic. And I told him, I think you're narrow-minded. You know, I think it was Einstein who said, if you keep doing the same thing and you want a different result, like you're not really well, it's called insanity. So what are you trying then? I didn't say this obviously, but what are you trying? You got a 3% success rate. Why don't you just try something else rather? Try a different way. There was just a real battle going in because it meant that I would have to stay longer. Who would want to stay longer? Because this rehab, you know, I didn't get asked if I want to cook breakfast in my bed. You know, do I want boiled eggs or fried eggs? Look, it was an army. It was an army, like army. That was really serious. This was kind of a friendly environment, but it was very structured, and it was, I think, moderately disciplined, very healthy, I thought. 3 weeks went by, and I withdrew. Till I had that last pull. That was a significant day. I'm going to come back to that in a quick moment. Just want to tell you this. It took me another 2 years to withdraw from the medication. I phoned my sponsor once, just being out of rehab just a little bit. I said, I don't know what's going on here. I'm going through this stuff. He says, why don't you just Google PAWS, acronym, Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome. So I did, because I'm a Benny bookworm. And I read, and there it is, all those symptoms. And then, okay, so I'm okay. Because I think that's what wants to hear in recovery in those initial days. Am I okay? Because this world of recovery is so foreign. This world of recovery, of freedom and of peace, is just so foreign. You actually have to get used to that. And I think that's why the program was a bit longer than I would have wanted to. So it's 6 years, 9 months, 3 days later. It was a time where I can now reflect back. I think my time in rehab was one of learning a lifestyle. It was not learning life skills as good as they are, as helpful as they are. It was a program that started with 3 steps, and I've mentioned that I learned the other steps, which I practiced in extent. Step two was a no-brainer. Yeah, you got to hand over to it's not a handover, but you're going to need help from a source outside of yourself. I got that. But number one, yeah, I understand that one because I got to the place. But number three. And so for me, step 3 has become and is still one of the most important steps that I follow. I attended AA meetings, NA meetings in those months, and I listened acutely. I was wanting to know, because in this rehab, I noticed some people came back, and other people would leave going like on a high, like really strong in their recovery, as it would be said, an example to the other residents. And then 3 weeks later, 1 month later, they were back. They were back at square one. And I just said, what the hell is that? Go through all this, and then I wanted to know, why do they relapse? And I guess there can be a multiple of reasons, but I just simplify it for myself. It's for me, it's that step 1, 2, and 3. The rest of is how to live. The first is absolutely your foundation. So when I pray the serenity prayer, it can become a bit like a mantra. You just do it. I just do it. But for me, it's actually how I live life. Is to really let go of the stuff that I cannot control. And I take responsibility. It's that courage. The second part of the serenity prayer. It's that courage to take responsibility, to do the stuff that I need to take care of. And then obviously at times one needs to know the difference, because it can be a little bit, gee, what is that? And that's not just what I pray when I attend an AA meeting. It's what I absolutely live by. So what is my life like since then? Well, my wife will tell you that she got a new husband back. Because this husband now lived with not getting anxious anymore, but just letting go of stuff that he couldn't control, most in life. And she latched on to those principles, those steps. She just latches on. Often I hear her say, more than me, well, Nika, I guess we just got to let this one go. I said, that's right, we just let this one go. Like most stuff in life, you just got to let go and surrender it. And I surrender it into somebody who's got safe hands. My children got a father back who is relationally attentive to what they do, and to the grandchildren. I'm involved in their lives. To be a father and grandfather doesn't come naturally to me. I have to work on it. My wife is a mother and a grandmother. It's like there's an anointing on her life, or there's something about suspicious. She just does it so with ease. So sometimes I get dragged along, but I'm okay with that, because I want to be involved. What about my work? So what is it like? What is it like? Sorry, what is the time again here? Are we good? Okay. I said, what is it like for a pastor so the congregation get this letter from me when I'm gone to rehab. There's not too many pastors that go to rehab. And the leader said, what should I put in there? I said, just say it as it is. By that time, I didn't really care. No, not really care. I didn't care at all. And so he wrote a letter to explain to the church what was happening. They could have responded in all kinds of ways. They actually responded like Christians do. They were absolutely gracious. Some of them started to come out of their little closets to say what they're doing. Because they thought, if this guy can, who looks like he's got his life always together, and he didn't, then I guess it's okay for me. And to be honest, while I was in rehab, I didn't really care too much what was happening on the outside. I was so focused because I was wanting to get better. I was so desperate. I wanted to get better. So the first Sunday I'm back, I was not ashamed at all of what I got into. Not regretting it at all. But how are these people were going to meet, haven't seen me for 3 months. For those of you who have a church background, if it's a good church, if it is a good experience, a pastor has an ability to be really a good shepherd to the people. They really feel cared for, like, they're not programs or abstractions, or they're people. There's something of a deposit of God in them, and he shepherds them, But I was so vulnerable. What are these people going to do? So in a letter to them, just before that Sunday, I said to them, I'm coming out, I'll be there on Sunday, and it would be great to see you again. So I'm just sitting, hello, and eventually I get called forward by one of the leaders. And as I walk forward, the people started to clap. Okay, we're not in a clappy church, all right? Started to clap. And then when I got to the front, just like as one person, they just stood up and they gave a standing ovation. And I was standing there, I don't know what to do. I just looked like there was this hole in the floor. I was just let it absorb me. They was just absolutely gracious and affirming the honesty that I had a problem and I needed help. And so I went for help. And since then, they will tell you they got back a new pastor. A bonus is that I'm helping, through the years, a fair amount of either families or addicts or alcoholics. I have learned, I know the rhythm of living in a 12-step program. I don't even have to think about it anymore. I just live it. It just comes with time. And that has been a real privilege. Just something else that I think that might be worth to mention is that being a Benny bookworm, once I got back, I wanted to know what is happening in this world of healthcare professionals and medication. What is it? And so that took many hours and many books, but perhaps I just mentioned this one. I discovered this book called Saving Normal. It's written by a psychiatrist. Saving Normal, here's the subtitle, I have to read it. An insider's revolt against out-of-control psychiatric diagnosis, DSM-5, Big Pharma, and the medicalization of ordinary life. All right, this is the author's name is Alan Francis. Alan was in charge of the 4th edition of the manual, which is like the big book for us in AA, the manuals for those healthcare professionals that deal with so-called mental disorders. And he got so concerned. The 5 editions have come out of this particular book, and it's a book that insurance will use to see if they're going to pay. I mean, it's like a Bible. It's like a holy book stuff. And he was in charge of the 4th edition. The 5th edition was coming out. It's now about 4 years ago since it came out, and he was concerned. He headed up the task force for the 4th edition. But he was concerned about the 5th edition because he says, we in the psychiatric community are just diagnosing, and it's called diagnostic inflation, fancy words for it. You just diagnose this and diagnose that and diagnose that. And he's now in retirement, he went to a cocktail party and met some of his colleagues who were busy working on the 5th edition. And he said within 1 hour, he observed that as he was talking to his colleagues, that he had 5 new disorders. 5. And so he wrote the book, Saving Normal. And it's very clear. I think I listened to him, and plus he summarizes it. It's just we've become a bunch of pill poppers. And it's all rooted for me, and I'm simplifying again, in that book by, what's his name again, the psychiatrist who's died now, you often quote him, Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, first sentence, life is difficult. I've come to accept that because has life changed in these years of recovery? No, not a bit. The curveballs have come. They've come. My son getting divorced after 3 years of marriage, etc., etc., etc. Heart-rending stuff. Life does not change, but I've changed. And I'm living out of a freedom of acceptance. Acceptance is the answer. Look at Big Book, page 407, particular page 411. Where there's no need for medication or alcohol or any other substance to say, I'm okay with life. I can do life. And I guess the proof of the pudding is what I learned in rehab, and I'll finish with that. What I learned in rehab, will it work outside there? Because in rehab, it's a very safe place. I experience the staff being utterly committed to making sure that when I leave, I'll be okay. A dream come true? Yeah. It's a dream that has come true. I'm able to live life in a surrendered way, letting go of that what I can't control. To take responsibility for the things that I need to. And with God's help to just know the difference. Just thank you for listening. I enjoyed just going back. Thank you.